Hey everybody, this is Alireza from Zafre, and today we're going to be talking about 7 common mistakes beginners make in Webflow. So there's no particular reason why I chose the number 7. I just started writing some of the common mistakes that I see people make when they get started with Webflow, and I found 7 of them. But of course there's going to be more of them that I'm sure people are going to be talking about in the comment section below. So make sure to check out the comments if you want to see more of them. Now then, let's get started. This is definitely the most common one that I see people do, and it's one that saves a lot of time and a lot of headache if you just get it right and use it properly. So it's not using global styles. Now here's what global styles even are and how they work. For example, I have this paragraph right here that has some text inside of it, and I know that most of the paragraphs in my website are going to have a certain style that's applied to them. So I can just click over here and choose all paragraphs, and as you can see, the all paragraphs part is highlighted in a different color than the class one, because it's not a class, it's being applied to every single paragraph within my entire website. So I'm going to click on it, and you can see that there are some stylings that are being applied to just our paragraphs. So instead of, for example, I can get rid of this margin button like that, and that means that all of our paragraphs throughout the entire website no longer have this margin button. Or I can even change the font size to, like, let's say 1.2, and that means all of our paragraphs in our entire website are now that font size. This is gonna make your job a lot easier, and usually, personally, what I like to do is whenever I start working on a brand new Webflow project, the very first thing I do is that I start styling my default global styles. This way it's going to be much easier to work with and add elements later on, and there's going to be just less copy and pasting and working involved. And I start with the body element first, and then move on to headers, and then do paragraphs, and then after that images and other elements. So for example, I come over here and choose the body. This is the first one I usually style, and I give some default styles for the text for typography here. So for example, I give it the color of white. That means that now all of the text throughout my website are going to have the color white, and I give it a background color of black, and the entire body of my website is going to have the color black for all the pages. Like if I create, for example, 10 different pages, all of them are going to have the background color of black. I can just come back here and change it, and I give it a line height of 1, so that all of them are going to have that. And then I pick the font and font weight. These are usually the basic ones that I like to do. It's background color and then some typography. But you can do more if you think it's necessary for your own project. And here's how you don't do it. Here's what happens when you ignore these global styles. You're just gonna come over here and add some paragraph class, for example, a paragraph text, and then you can just style it that way. This isn't a terrible way to go about it, but it's just much more efficient and easier to do it. So for example, now if I want to create another paragraph, I can come over here, go like this, and it's instantly gonna have the look that I want it to have. It's gonna have the right styling attached to it. However, if I was to just ignore my default global styles, I had to, come over here, copy this class, come over here, paste it, and then come over here, copy again, come over here, paste it. See how much harder it is and how much more time it takes, other than just doing it once time, just doing it one and then moving on, and then it's applied to all of that type of element, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So let's scroll down, and the next one is unoptimized images, and this is a pretty important one. It took me a while to get the hang of as well. So what happens whenever you, let's say I want to create a new Webflow project and I just want to just look for some images online. So I start typing like Unsplash, and I come over here to find some images that I want. Whenever you download these images, they're gonna be in their original size, which means they're gonna be pretty large. For example, if I let's click this one and I download this one, it's gonna be like 2.8 megabyte for this one. So if I come over here I already have this image selected. So this is the default that I took from Unsplash. It's this picture of a sky, and it's got a size of 2.5 megabytes. So 2.5 megabytes is pretty large for an image. Here's what you can do to fix that. You can go and use sites like TinyPNG, for example, and you can just upload your images in here, and then it's going to shrink that image and give you a much more compressed and compact version that's going to, for the most part, keep the quality of the original picture. So here I have the compressed, smaller version of my sky picture, and we can see that it's 455 kilobytes instead of 2.5 megabytes. So it's significantly smaller, and it looks almost the same. Let me just pull these up so I can compare them to. They don't look much different from one another. So here they are. I mean, you can barely even tell the difference between the two of them. But one is significantly smaller than the other one, and it's going to make your load time much faster. So make sure you actually compress your images before you add them to your Webflow project. Because look at how much larger this is. It's like 5 times the original one. So definitely make sure you optimize your images before you import them into Webflow. And the reason why I'm doing this in this order is that I usually style my global styles and then I optimize my images before I import them into my Webflow project, and then I do everything else. I actually start creating the layout and everything. So make sure to do these two things first whenever you're starting a new project, because they're going to save you a lot of time and headache later on. Next one is forgetting to clean up leftover styles and interactions. So this is one that I usually like to do last after I've done everything else, and it's super simple. All you have to do is just come over here, click on the style selector, click on this icon right here, and it's going to show you all the styles that are no longer being used but they are part of your project. So for instance, if I come over here and give this a class of, let's say, pink, and I change the color to just a pink color like that, and I said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like the pink color. I want to remove it, and just remove it. Now that pink color is no longer being used in any of the elements in our project, so we can just come over here, click this, and it's going to show us, hey, you have this pink that's a combo class of content title. Do you want to remove it? And I say yes, remove it, and now it's removed. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you are using custom code, for example, you're using custom JavaScript or CSS, and you give this, let's say you give this, let me pick a better example here. Let's say we add a button here, right? A button, and you give this button class of button, and then you give it a class of active. So what happens is that, you know, whenever this button like is selected or something happens, we want to make this button active. Whenever it's active, it's going to have a different background color. For example, it's going to be like green whenever it's active. And then you can just control this. You can add or remove this active button using your JavaScript code, for example. But if I remove it here, it's still going to show up inside of this part right here, right? The Webflow isn't going to be able to tell, hey, if you are manipulating this active class using JavaScript or not. So if you are using JavaScript, make sure you don't remove this or any classes that works like this, where you add them or remove them using JavaScript, right? Because Webflow is not going to be able to tell if you're doing that or not. And then lastly, for interactions, it's super simple. Just come over here, click this button, but we don't have any unused interactions here, so it's not showing us anything. So let's just create that real quick. I go mouse hover, you know, test interaction, and I make it where it changes its color. If I can find color, font variation, border, text color, there we go. Just change its color, save. Now on mouse hover it changes the color. And I say I don't want to do this anymore. I can just remove this one, and now it's no longer being used. Okay, so that's how we can get rid of the interaction. And it's gonna get rid of all the interactions, not just the one that's no longer being used. Let's just get rid of this button as well. Now here's another example of that's related to classes. This one says using too many classes. So here I have two buttons. One of them is how you should style your buttons, and one of them is how you don't style your buttons, or any other element for that matter. So for our first one, we have a button, and we have a combo class of isPrimary. That means that our primary buttons are going to look like this. And then I have another one here that looks very similar, it just has the isRun class, which is gonna make it red. And it does the exact same thing, like it has the exact same thing. It's just this one, for some reason, I just gave it like way too many classes, which is super unnecessary. If you have multiple styles that you want to add to something, you don't need to add a different separate class for every single one of them. You can just create one. For example, look at it here. This says isPrimary. It's doing multiple things, right? Instead of having one for each of them. Over here, this one says has border. So if you come over here, it says there's a border of 1 pixel and it's colored white. And this one also has that. It says right here. This one has a border radius. This one also has border radius. Like for example, I don't need to explain, every single styling that I'm doing using the combo classes with a separate class. I can just do this. I can just use one class and give it all the styles that I want, like border radius and border. Just bring this back. And so that's how we can do this. I usually never need to go more than 2 levels deep, so I have primer here. For example, I could just give it another one like is hidden to make it where I don't want to show it right now, right? I can just do that. But you're basically never gonna need more than 2 of these combo classes. If you ever find yourself going deeper than that and you're using 3 or 4 separate combo classes like this one, you're probably overdoing it and don't need to be doing that. You can just do the same thing with many fewer classes. Next one is not using a container. So as you can see, I am using a container for this project, and the containers is gonna all it's gonna do is just gonna add some space around my main content, so that it's not gonna be attached to the left and right of the screen. If I wasn't use a container, for example, if I was to do this, it's gonna look like this. It's not gonna look great. It's gonna be attached to the left and right of the website. Now, how I like to create my containers is that I can just give it, they have a default max width whenever you add a container, but I look to give it a container class, and I like to add some paddings to it. Right, so you can see 5em, 5em, 5em. And then for the higher or larger desktops, I like to use a higher value. I use 11 for here, 1100, 1250, and then 1600. And then for smaller, we can use 728. This is the default one. I don't add this one. And for smaller sizes, I can even use like 90 view width. And I did even reduce the paddings here as well. So you can do that. That's how I personally like to create my container. But there are other ways to go about making a container too. It's not just one. Okay, here we go. For the 6th one, we have not using the proper tags. So right here, as you can see, we have a bunch of elements. And whenever I add this element, I just chose div as div element. But if I go to the settings, you can change this to be different tag. You can change this to be, for example, an address or an article. And I think article here makes a lot of sense. So I'm not going to explain what each and every one of these do, but there is a small explanation on the bottom here that you can read to help you figure them out. But basically, here's some of the most important ones that you need to know about. Div is basically whenever something you just don't know what you want to give it, like it doesn't need to be any specific tag, just give it a div. Header is for the header of your project. For example, you're gonna have it on the top of your page, and then footer is gonna be for the footer of your page. It's gonna be right on the bottom of the page. It's gonna be for that section. Let's see. Then we have navigation for the menu. Right, it's gonna be the div that controls all of your navigation, like menu, buttons, and options and links. Main is gonna be the main div that holds everything like this. Like I can create over here div, give it a type of main, and then put it inside of it. Like this is gonna be the main, that's gonna have all of our sections inside of it. Let me just undo that real quickly. Okay. So yeah. The rest isn't super important, you know. Address is for whenever you want to give something like a contact information or address, and figure is for whenever you're having images that you want to put inside of divs, you can use figures. I'm just gonna put it back to the div and move on. Your site will be working fine if you don't, change these tags and you don't use a custom tag, but it is preferred to use the proper tag for your divs, so that they can do well on Google search algorithms. Okay, so not using proper tags. Last one is not using variables. So if you click over here on the variable section, you can see all the variables that our site is currently using. I'm using a couple of them. For example, one for black for the color black, and then white for the color white. These are unnecessary. Let's remove these. Yeah. I'm using black and whites for the colors, but you can use more of them. For example, you can create a, let's see, create a color, it's a primary, and then we give it a color of like blue, for example, like that. I know that's gonna be like a primary color. And whenever I want to change something's color, I can just come over here and find it right there. And now all of our titles are gonna be using the primary color. So there's three types of variables. There's colors, there's sizes, and then there's font family. You're mainly going to be using the size and color one, but you can use the font family as well. So here for sizes, for whenever I want to give padding to my container, I can just use these variables here, large padding, and I believe I even gave it to, oh yeah, here we go. If I give it to the content divs here, I give it a large padding so that they look like this. Of course, it's here being used as a margin instead of padding. So for example, something like separator or space might be a better name for it. These variables are gonna help make it where if you want to change something later on, it's not gonna be all that difficult, right? So for example, if I come over here and I change the color white, let me see, color white to something else like a green. Now everywhere where I use this variable, where I use the white variable, it's gonna now change to green. So check this out. See, now all the text that we're using white are now green. All the buttons are now green, the border for them. Everything just that was using the color white now changed to green. Instead of having to change them individually on every single element, which would have taken forever, I just changed one thing in a variable section, and now it's all changed throughout the whole website because they were all using that one variable. See how much easier it is and how much less time this takes. And I could just undo this and it goes back to how it was before. So that's it for this video, and we'll see you in the next one.